I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting from Bonn, Germany, from the Global Media Forum. Well, the Washington Post has revealed the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court secretly gave the National Security Agency sweeping power to intercept information, quote, concerning all but 4 countries around the world. A classified 2010 document leaked by Edward Snowden lists 193 countries that would be of valid interest for U.S. intelligence. Only 4 were protected from NSA spying: Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. The NSA was also given permission to gather intelligence about the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the European Union, and the International Atomic Energy Agency. According to the Washington Post, the secret document indicates that academics, journalists, and human rights researchers living in the United States and abroad could all be targeted under the order. Well, we turn now to a Democracy Now! Global broadcast exclusive. We're joined here in Bonn, Germany by Sarah Harrison of WikiLeaks, who accompanied Edward Snowden on his flight from Hong Kong to Moscow last June. She spent 39 days with Snowden in the transit zone of an airport in Moscow while she assisted in his legal application to 21 countries for asylum. Sarah Harrison then remained with Snowden for about 3 more months after Russia granted him temporary asylum. Sarah Harrison is investigative editor of WikiLeaks and acting director of the newly formed Courage Foundation. We welcome you to Democracy Now! And thanks so much for doing this interview. You're living in Berlin, Germany right now, but you're from Britain. Why not go home?
Britain has a terrorism act which has within it a portion called Schedule 7, which is quite unique. What it is it gives officials the ability to detain people at the border as they go in or out, or even transit through the country. And this allows them to question people on no more than a hunch, giving them no right to silence. It also was the case of no right to a lawyer as well, though that's starting to be changed. But you're compelled to answer their questions. All the legal advice received is that the likelihood is very strong that I would be Schedule 7, detained under this, and questioned. Because of my work with WikiLeaks and Snowden, there are certainly answers for source protection reasons that I would be unable to answer, which would make me committing a crime upon returning home.
This is what happened to Glenn Greenwald's partner, David Miranda, Glenn Greenwald, who met, of course, with Edward Snowden and Laura Poitras in Berlin and wrote the first articles about the documents.
Yeah, he was actually just transiting through the country. He was through the UK. He had been in Berlin. He was going back to Glenn in Rio, in Brazil. And he was just transiting through the UK. The UK officials got intel that he might have some information that was of benefit. They decided to their terrorism investigation, and so they detained him under this, and he was compelled to answer all of their questions.
And held for many hours.
He was held for the full 9 hours.
Before they would have to arrest him if they held him any longer.
Arrest or release, yes. And he was not entitled to a lawyer or anything that full time.
So, Sarah Harrison, how did you end up with Edward Snowden on that flight from Hong Kong to Russia?
Well, he reached out for help, and we were uniquely in a position to help for several reasons. We have a history and an understanding of what it is to be in a position where you're being persecuted, where you're dealing with the government of the United States, getting their full force down upon you. We have a number of connections, legal, diplomatic, around the world, and I have a lot of contacts in Hong Kong, so I've been there many times, so I was able to operate there knowing the city when maybe others would be unable.
So you got there after he was speaking to Glenn Greenwald and Laura Poitras as the articles were being released?
Yes.
And then what happened? You were meeting him for the first time?
Yes, I had not met him before. Well, we worked to find out the legal situation, the legal options, to negotiate his ability to exit the country, and to ensure that he would have as high a probability of asylum and safe passage in other places around the world.
So how did you make it from, I mean, he was at the hotel with Glenn and Laura. He then was taken by human rights lawyers to be protected, as the media found, where they were. How did you even make it to the airport? Were you concerned that he would be arrested in Hong Kong at the behest of the United States?
Well, when we left, the United States had just put in an extradition request for him. The process is that this has to go through the court system there and be approved or be denied. We actually left before it had finished going through the Hong Kong court system, so there was no illegality about his departing the country.
Mm-hmm. And if he had been arrested in Hong Kong, what would have happened?
So there are two things at play. He had the ability to put in an asylum request. Hong Kong then would obviously have had to have decided what its decision on this asylum request was. They actually have a history of taking a very long time to do this. The problem with his case would have been that if, as it did, the extradition request came in, and when it was approved, he would have to be arrested and then held in prison whilst either the extradition request or the asylum were being decided which avenue they would take. And because often the asylum takes so long, he would be held in prison for an awful long time.
So you get on this plane with him in Hong Kong, and why did you end up in Moscow?
Choosing the route to take, the aim was to get to Latin America, Ecuador specifically,
because they were granting him asylum.
They were obviously positive towards the granting of asylum,
as they had done with Julian Assange, who's in the Ecuadorian embassy in
exactly.
London. And was Julian helping you with this?
Very much so. Very much so.
So really, you, WikiLeaks, and Julian facilitated Snowden making it out of Hong Kong
and gaining asylum. Yes. The reason for going via Russia was that obviously we needed to have a safe flight route. You can't actually get direct from Hong Kong to Latin America. Normally flights to Latin America go through the United States or Western Europe, and this was obviously not an option in this case, so hence the sort of seemingly bizarre route via Russia and Cuba onto Latin America.
So you weren't planning to stop in Russia, but what happened?
No. Well, whilst we were in the air, as soon as we'd left, Hong Kong announced that he'd left, I think in an ability to sort of say, you know, stop hassling us, he's gone, he's not here anymore. So then the United States made very public announcements about how they had cancelled his passport, and if anyone, you know, any onward travel therefore would be without any valid documentation. So we were essentially stranded by the US government in Russia.
And you stayed in the airport for
39 days. Well, we didn't have a visa. I mean, that was not that you can transit through without needing a visa as long as you're under 24 hours within the airport. So hence we had no visa to remain in Russia, so he couldn't just walk on through. And so we spent 39 days trying to get asylum in various places around the world, including Germany. And they were either turned down or ignored, the requests, for the most part. Latin America was very supportive, but the ability to physically get there safely at this stage was impossible. And so hence applying for temporary asylum in Russia.
I wanted to turn to an interview I just did in Berlin when I interviewed Edward Snowden's European lawyer, Wolfgang Kallach, about the role of WikiLeaks and Sarah Harrison, our guest, in helping Snowden.
I think WikiLeaks was extremely helpful in the decisive phase in the beginning of the Snowden revelations, and especially Sarah as a person was extremely courageous, because going to Moscow is not, I mean, that's not the easiest place in the world, and it's not that they are waiting for us there, and so going into this unsecure situation was extremely brave from Sarah, and I'm very happy that she's living now in Berlin, and but I would be happier to know that she is not facing a criminal charge because of what she did for Edward Snowden.
Is she facing criminal charge?
We don't know, because I mean, many of these criminal investigations are secret, so we have no indication if or if not a criminal investigation is on the way, but the risk at the moment is too high for her to travel back to the UK, so she better stays in Germany. But I hope that this is not the end of the story.